Welcome to Digitized Spotlight, your lens into the best builders in consumer crypto. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Winnie. On this series, we explore some of the latest trends emerging in consumer crypto and chat with those building at the forefront. On this episode, we dig into the intersection of art, technology, and blockchain infrastructure.
We chat with Pete, one of the co-founders of Winston Artory Group, alongside Elizabeth von Hasberg and Non Decking, formed through the merger of Winston Art Group and Artory.
This groundbreaking merger combines decades of trusted expertise with cutting-edge technology, creating a full suite of platform for arts and collectibles. The company has appraised over $100 billion in art cumulatively and maintains the largest private transaction database in the world. Let's get started and chat with Pete. Hey Pete, it's great to have you on this episode of Digitized Spotlight. You just announced the formation of Winston Artory Group through a strategic merger. Congrats, first of all. And I'm excited to get into the nitty-gritty of all of it. I've obviously had a chance to get a front row seat to all this excitement with Strobe over the past couple of months. So I'm excited for listeners to kind of learn more about Winston's 15-year track record of appraising over $100 billion worth of art and artery with its blockchain technology. I guess, first of all, how do you feel? How does it feel now that's all announced and done?
You know, today was the day that it felt real, like it took so much work and time to close the merger initially, but we couldn't tell anybody, and so today's like really the coming out day, and it feels absolutely effing amazing. So thank you for all the support in helping getting this done.
Of course.
Oh, that's awesome, Pete. Congrats. So maybe to start at the beginning, can you introduce yourself, your other co-founders, and what led to this momentous moment of the merger?
Yeah, so the three of us, we all have pretty different personas, and it's a great compliment. I'll start with myself, even though I'm the least important out of the three. But I had I have a background in finance. I spent the last 10 years in fintech. I was on the Web 2 side, very much focused on structured credit, securitized credit. I got into crypto during DeFi summer when I saw the first deal happening on Centrifuge. And that was the aha moment for me of, so much of my job for 20 years has been, frankly, like the reconciliation of payments, right? It's incredible. I always told people I wanted a payment on time that was accurate and auditable, and blockchain actually was the solution for it. That's how I got to know the team at Block Tower a couple years ago, and their relationship with Centrifuge just became close from a network and friend standpoint. And prior to joining the Winston Artory Group, I was advising startups, investing in startups, really looking at different ways that I can add value just in terms of my background and experience in the capital markets. I found Artory by accident, frankly. And they were actually hiring like a software engineer. And I don't know what I posted on LinkedIn, but this guy reached out to me and he said, based off of what I see, you should talk to these folks. I probably had 5 or 6 calls with Nana. He eventually convinced me, come down to New York, check out what we're doing. It's really different. It's hard to explain. And, I showed up and I realized there are 2 leaders, both Nana Decking and Liz von Habsburg, that have built so much brand equity for themselves, but also any organization they've been a part of. And that was a starting point. I actually trusted them. They are mavens in the industry. They represent very different sides of the market. Liz, coming from the valuation side and independent side, she started, years ago, really leading the appraisal department at Christie's, moved to another auction house after that, helped build up actually what at the time, through 2000 to 2010 was the largest independent art advisory firm in the US. She ended up actually doing a lift out of her team and started Winston Art Group in 2010. And on the other side of the business, Nana really is known as one of the biggest dealers in the market. So his last job in the art world was vice chairman at Sotheby's and global head of private sales. Anything over $1 million that was getting traded privately, not at auction, was going across his desk. He was instrumental in building up, the largest collection of old master painting or French Impressionist paintings in private hands. I think if you ask him, he's probably purchased something like 200 Monets There are
That's
only
insane.
2,000 Monets in the
I don't
world.
even know.
You know?
Yeah, there's only a handful out there.
Right. And what they were doing when I showed up was fascinating. They had 4 different partnerships ongoing. They were building investment products, and that's really where I sat. So I actually worked for a joint venture, between a 50-50 JV between the 2 companies. They were also working on the first end-to-end valuation software and transaction management system for the art world, really objectifying the process and taking an asset class that people always say, but it's so subjective. There's qualities and there's qualitative aspects of valuation, but it doesn't mean that it's subjective, right? And the third partnership they had was on the data front. Winston has aggregated a massive data set, really from dealers, in galleries. Every fair that happens around the world every year, Winston has represented a third of the largest collectors in the world. They receive all of those pre-fair previews from every gallery, so they see what's on sale. They're going to the shows, they're going to the fairs and finding out what's trading. And that data set is, kind of unmatched in this market. Private sales data is not available. Obviously, it's not auction, so it's not public. And the way that you can use it to generate value or frankly risk insights is beyond what folks can do on the public side. When you really
Yeah.
combine all pieces, the tokenization becomes the key. You don't want to have to trust just us, right? Definitely don't trust me. If you want to trust somebody, trust Liz and Nana. And it still comes down to trust, right? And it's okay if you can only validate information so far, but the fact that there's no repository where somebody can say there's standards that the market has agreed on, that the information's immutable, it's auditable, I can go back and see who said what, and it's privately secured to the owner of those tokens, unlocks all different types of transactions and frankly velocity of transactions across the entire art market. And when you put those pieces together, this is something that nobody will ever be able to replicate.
Yeah.
And we have a $5 trillion problem that'll take 30 years to fix.
Yeah. I mean, I love hearing how different all 3 of you are and how you complement these ways. Like Liz from kind of the Winston side and previously at Christie's, and then Nane from Sotheby's, and you from like a traditional finance kind of background. It's interesting because it's a problem that's so big but so underexplored, because a lot of times people from the crypto world, like we've seen a lot of like art financing platforms over the last couple of cycles, none of that has really worked out because it's a lot of crypto bros kind of solving this problem without like a right to win or without a book of business or without the right distribution. So I love hearing kind of how all 3 of you guys came together.
Yeah. I would add, and to that, and it's not as if we don't believe in things like fractionalization or we don't believe in an alternative marketplace, but I mean, this goes for crypto at large, let alone for, what people have built in art tokenization. Listen, the 3 of us on this call can get a lot of theses correct. 99% of the people that start a company in digital assets get the thesis correct. It's the execution.
Yeah, it comes down to execution.
Hard. Yeah. And I think in this world, in the art world, it's insular. It is very relationship driven. And, imagine you have a duopoly of, if I have a high priced, high quality artwork, I have 2 known brands, despite the fact that they charge an arm and a leg to actually sell, I can trust them. They have, embedded brand equity. It's 250 years running. For somebody to show up and say, hey, come sell your artwork over here. We've never sold an artwork. We're selling it to, small investors that have never bought an artwork. And we can't give you any guarantee of any kind. Like, why would anybody, it results in clear adverse selection. And that's really where the execution really falls apart for a lot of these folks.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you talked a bit about how you're building this like auditable repository using the blockchain. Can you dig a bit more into like what the product looks like? Who would be using it? What are the use cases?
Yeah. So maybe, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning. It very much is like a DeFi mullet, like it's TradFi in the front, DeFi in the back. And, that's how I would describe our business. Fundamentally, every object that we process in any way, we are tokenizing. It depends on who the client is and what their actual intentions are. of how we're actually depositing that in their wallet. So for instance, if it's a very much like one-off transaction, it may be, we may just be using DLT to create efficiencies for our own processes, where frankly, we can shrink the time of doing an appraisal, for instance, from called 6 weeks to 6 days, makes the information retrievable and trustworthy. The systems that exist today, it would be like showing up to a knife fight with an abacus, like people are working on with pens and paper pads.
Yeah, it's like such an antiquated market. Yeah.
Ago. So what we've built is we've tokenized on different multiple chains, where we're ending up actually recently is transitioning back to Ethereum mainnet. It frankly is for the I would say like transaction frequency. It makes a lot of sense. We don't have to deal with a lot of the other things that come with layer twos, which frankly is the hype of like, oh, this year it's, Polygon, this year it's Avalanche, this year it's Base, and if, you ask anybody, especially I'm sure on the investor side, what chain should I build on? It's going to depend on what year we're talking about.
And like if you're tokenizing a $2-3 million piece of art, it's going to be, these are like low volume, high value pieces. So having it on mainnet makes a lot more sense than having, things on
like gas fees. Like what are we talking about? And really what the delivery though, really what we're focused on in building and launching like throughout this whole year is the client delivery mechanism. So again, it depends on the client. Some of them basically say, I want it in my MetaMask wallet. And like, yes, I'll interact with it through your portal, but otherwise like that's good enough for me. I can access the information that I need. We use Arweave to get anything that's off chain. But what it effectively looks like is we tokenize the tombstone information. It's connected via smart contract to certificates. And certificates include everything from attestations to the actual documents that people can access. And when you log into your account, just like we're all used to logging into Coinbase, frankly, you can see everything you own. You can see a bunch of analytics on it. We provide different services depending on who the client is. We have some enterprise clients where, I think the road to tokenization is very different. They don't care that we tokenize it, but they're not worried about, frankly, like ownership and custody. That's not their focus. A couple of the financial institutions that is why we're working with them, is you've seen a bunch of them build their own tokenization platform, if not, some of them building their own protocols. So we have a portal though, that's just like you would see anything else that you would interact with in stocks, bonds, crypto, otherwise. But it actually shows you insights. So what I tell a lot of people about our business and the market is people in this world don't know what they own, let alone what it's worth, let alone what to do with it. And then even if you can solve those three things, it's like, all right, but how do I do it? Right? Like, thank you. Okay, you're telling me I should sell this thing. Where do I go? Right? And today you have maybe 18 different parties involved in that, 3 or 4 different lawyers. There could be 3 advisors, multiple auction houses, multiple lenders, insurance companies, you name it. It could be multiple owners, right? Because they're in multiple entities. And having that all in one place creates a different level of convenience. And because it's tokenized, even moving that token into, transferring title becomes way easier. So settlement in this world is a little weird as well, where it's a physical object, so you have to take possession of it, right? So we're actually working with a company right now in asset tagging, where it would trigger actually the money leaving escrow and the title being transferred via the token. But we're really trying to create a full kind of closed loop system here that can work with a collector from start to finish, multiple generations, and has embedded services. So you don't need to go somewhere else to go get your loan. We can facilitate with them, for instance, right?
I love that. How I think about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is almost like a Bloomberg kind of like you said, Coinbase terminal for art. But unlike financial markets, one thing that I think a lot about is how the art world is famously just like very relationship driven, and it's built on trust and historically has been quite opaque by design. How do you think about this new combined Winston Artory Group, and how do you create network effects in a market that's historically been built on these exclusive relationships and asymmetric information and are generally like not, are quite apprehensive, I would say, about tech.
Yeah. Two comments, I think. One of them is on the market structure and opacity. I think back to, I don't know if either of you ever sat on the trading side, especially on the credit trading side. That market is incredibly inefficient. Like, you want to buy or sell bonds, you're still calling people. Like, there
Yeah,
are a
honestly,
couple of things out there, but there's no natural centralized system for this stuff. The bonds barely trade. Like, people talk about bonds as if they're these like super liquid assets. Like, they're actually not. You see, especially in ABS, you may see bonds never trade throughout the entire life of the deal. And so the way that you trade them is OTC, very little transparency. How different is the information asymmetry in trading bonds than it is trading in artwork? I couldn't tell you fundamentally it's that different, in that the seller is always going to benefit more than the buyer with information asymmetry. Always, right? They're going to do everything they can to maintain that position in the market. The art world, specifically, if you think about the buy side and the sell side, there is literally no buy side institution. We are trying to create the first, where we are an institution that represents buyers at large. Outside of that, it's extremely fragmented. The average advisory shop is 1.5 people in the industry. They're also proprietorships, which is fine, but there's no way to actually access information at large and scale a business across 4 multiple buyers. Flip side is on the sell side, right? Sotheby's and Christie's together represent, think last year, call it about a third of all the auction sales that occur in the market. That's an incredible concentration with just 2 parties. And so it's actually a market structure kind of bug, more than a feature, in that their biggest incentive is to maintain that lock and grasp on information. Whereas the irony, you sell a $40 million object, there are only 5 people in the world that could buy it and want to buy it, so theoretically, if you actually expanded the information universe and were disseminating it, I would argue that the efficiency of capital markets would benefit everybody. Like, prices go up and liquidity goes up. But that's the status quo. And so really what we're trying to do is sort of change the narrative from opacity. Like, I love the art market because of the opacity. Collectors aren't, that's not really the collector's view. It's the house view from the 2 biggest auction houses, because that's their incentive. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's a difference between sell side and buy side.
Yeah. Have you noticed any like resistance to kind of digitization, or how collectors or buyers are embracing more like tech tools and platforms?
Yeah. So the last, I don't know, call it 8 weeks, I've been on the road a lot and meeting with current clients, current partners, describing them what we do. And it's funny, like, if I go back a few months, there was this kind of undercurrent of like, we hope they feel okay about this, that 100% of people that we've spoken to are like, thank God, like, we have
Love
nowhere to
that.
log in. Or my client, like our client, they might have 20% of their net worth in art. It could be 5. We have no idea. They don't know. They don't even know where it is, right? Spent a week in California a few weeks ago for the same kind of endless roadshow. And, that there's real problems when it comes to natural disasters, right? And catastrophic events. The LA wildfires pretty much exposed the fact that people didn't schedule these items. So they had this blanket insurance. And so when they go to file a claim, what do you do if nobody can actually verify
I
that
didn't
the
even think of
item
that. Yeah.
was even owned, let alone there at the property? It's a big problem. And so people have dealt with it reactively, historically. The tools, to do this, I mean, they really haven't, they're not available. That's what we're creating. But even like, if you could hack it together, you could have started hacking it together 7 years ago, maybe. There's nothing out of the box. And so now people are super focused on proactively managing their collection as a financial asset, because of things as basic as insurance, and as more tactical as tax planning, right? No one ever really thought about tax planning,
Yeah.
tax loss harvesting on art, right? The answer is no. We haven't gotten any pushback, and like people are very excited to. We're solving problems. The how is you're working with an industry like this. The how is less important than the what. And if you work, in building any product, you work from the customer pain point backwards, right? You figure out what solution is best. And I think with Winston, the convenience is that we aren't an outsider. Not that Artery was an outsider, but it was a startup. It was like a new entrant and very specifically focused on the tech and data side. On the Winston side, it's an acceleration of business, right? And it's an expansion of business lines. And overall, it's just enhancing the client experience.
So you've talked about Sotheby's and Christie's and kind of like the massive market share that they have. Obviously, a lot of resources, existing relationships, and I know they're also launching their own tech initiatives. So we'd love to get a better sense of how you fit in with those. Are they competitive? Are they collaborative?
Yeah, so we've collaborated with the auction houses on the Artery side since the beginning. We've probably tokenized today probably upwards on like nearly $2 billion of art and collectibles, I would say, like on behalf of auction house clients. And you can look it up. Like it actually accelerates the sales, and it makes a lot of sales that have, if you think about not antiquities per se, but let's say like Marie Antoinette's candlestick, right? Like, so if I buy that or about a collection of items, I have to literally turn around and get it insured. And if I don't have all of the information, it like wrapped, perfected, and in an auditable sense for me to trust it in the first place, I'm just not going to show up, right? Let alone actually bid on this to bid the price up. So we did actually a pretty big sale a number of years ago. That was probably there was the realization moment of like, oh my gosh, it works. And actually like the client came out in this article and was like, I think we probably captured 50 to 100% more in proceeds because these items are tokenized. So generally speaking, we collaborate with them. We see them as necessary market players. We need the auction houses, like that is a liquidity and sales channel. But if you think once again about incentives, how much does an investment bank? How much does an investment bank use tech, right? Up until the advent of not just AI, but like I need agentic AI that's purpose built for me. 3 years or 4 years into this journey, they're saying, "Oh my gosh, now we can look at it to replace some of our, analyst work." And I saw an article yesterday. It was like, "And 40% can be replaced." It
I thought
mattered.
75. I thought
Was it?
it was, but yeah.
Call it 75.
Yeah.
Then it's the implementation. So my point is though, if you're on the sell side and that's your incentive of volume, if you can't show me how we can do more, then how do I care?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So they're always going to have that anchor and want to be partners with them.
That makes total sense. I'm curious, Pete, kind of like what behaviors you're seeing in the way people are collecting, purchasing, trading, or even speculating in fine art, like kind of the Monets of the world, Picassos of the world. Obviously, here in the crypto world, we've had a very front row seat into the speculation of more digital art and like NFTs. How do you think this kind of converges? Do you think we kind of bring some of that like degen speculative behavior to fine art once a lot of this is tokenized? Is that something that's like top of mind for you guys, or are you guys kind of just focusing on bringing the existing kind of assets just on chain?
It's a great question. So if you really zoom out, there's such a large generational shift happening, and no matter what asset class you're in, you always think of it as like the intergenerational wealth transfer. But within the art world, the concentration of art within that older generation is higher than any other asset class, right? The average art collector.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
The average art collector with more than a $10 million collection is on average going, dollar weighted. It's going to be 65, 75 years old, it's, and then it gets like pretty young, under 35 or 40. The tastes are on average completely different, and that means just beyond art, right? Like, so I don't know, like even the folks on this call, I collect cards. I've always collected cards. I still collect cards, and I collect coins. Why? I don't know, right? Like it's interesting to me, but that's what I like. And I have very few artworks. That's like not, it's, I like the other collectibles and I like them for different reasons, you know? If you look at the breakdown of our business from a segment or category perspective, about call it 2/3, maybe 65. Yeah, call it, yeah, 2/3 of our business is fine art. The remainder is other collectibles. And that percentage is continuing to grow every year. So the next largest category being wine and spirits. Um, that's cross generational. It's also the only collectible. Not I don't want to say only because I might misspeak, but basically the largest collectible that's a consumable. So you get to enjoy it because you own it, just like art. You get value appreciation if you want it as an investment, but you also get to consume it, which is the only, again, large collectible asset class that has a social aspect to it in a different way than watching it, looking at a painting or watching a theater performance, right? In terms of how you categorize art. The next largest is jewelry. And then after that, you really get into watches, collectible cards, and then the other category, which is cards, coins, stamps. We did I think it was a $2 million stamp collection sale recently.
What
And I
kind of
can't say that,
stamps?
yeah. And I think that, I don't know, I wouldn't say stamps is like the one that's really like hitting the market hard right now, but
But
to
like
say
$2 million collection of
a lot
stamps,
of, yeah, like
I'd be
unique,
curious
yeah.
to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I can find it and I can send you
Yeah,
the
send it and we'll
trade
put
we
it
did.
here because
Yeah,
I don't know who, like, first of all, how does one, I should be collecting stamps then.
they were rare Chinese stamps.
Wow, that's super
Um,
cool.
yeah, like really interesting stuff. We did uh, unopened VHS tapes and unopened DVDs recently. Sports memorabilia is huge, and there's the intergenerational transfer of assets that matters, right? So I mean, listen, if I inherited Monet, I'd be thrilled, right? But if I were the type of person that inherits a Monet, no, I'm not gonna want to own it. I have different tastes, and I think that's one piece of it. The second is more of when you think about, and it's the reason I built a thesis around the art and collectible space in the first place, is it is a scarce asset that is designed not to depreciate. You know, it, anything except for land, any real estate property will physically depreciate or it becomes obsolete. So there's a natural, almost time value accretion versus decay with collectibles as a category, and including art. And then you get down into the sort of secular trends of what matters over this 10-year period, let's just say. Interesting point about the degenerate kind of behavior. So maybe call it during COVID, honestly, was when a lot of people started collecting more. It's actually when like wine and spirits, like the biggest,
Yeah.
uptick. And you
There's
see it.
another company in the crypto Solana world called Baxis that is
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
tokenizing whiskey.
Yeah.
But very similar thesis. Yeah.
And I think there's a place for that. I think, so let me finish this. So uh, there's a behavior that started around emerging artists. People sort of took the view that, which is true, if you can find idiosyncratic risk to capture alpha, you really can find the highest frequency of that within emerging artists. The caveat is it's like venture investing, where like you look at your batting average, and if you just, a lot of people were like, I'm going to allocate to emerging artists, and you can't do that, right? They're not all the same. The three of us on this call could paint something right now, call ourselves an emerging artist, we're $0, right? It never goes anywhere. Getting to digital art, the only difference is that you can see that it went to zero, right? It's tracked that it went to zero. I would argue that, there's 99% of NFTs that are worth $0. The number's got to be 99.9999999%. We all did art in class, right? Like that's art. We can create it, and it's just not tracked or traced. So there actually was some degenerate behavior around that, of like that I want to allocate to art, and they think they're making beta plays, but there is no beta play in art. It's one of one. So there is no investable index, right? You need to curate a collection. That's how we started our art fund, is like by demand. We have collectors that, for the most part older, that collect impressionist art or old masters or even contemporary art, but they're not going to wake up and spend any time collecting emerging artists, but they're interested in an allocation to an alpha focused strategy. So like our art fund, I think, is up about 20% or something since we launched it 15 months ago. That, conveniently on target, great. We have a third party appraiser, but, I think it showed like the emerging artist market is down, and you have to be super selective. That's why you invest in a VC fund rather than just make, a few bets here and there, right? As an institutional or family investor. So yeah, it is more degenerate than you think, I guess, is where I'm going. It's a different type of TGen.
One thing that you had touched on was this data moat that you have, specifically your proprietary database of over 50 million public art transaction records. Yep. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. So we have really two databases that we've now conformed into one. On the public side, which is coming from the artery business, it's about now, call it 54 million records. About a quarter of them are fine art. The other 75% are other collectibles. So we actually have data that goes beyond the art world, and it matters for two reasons. One, obviously the practical application for the rest of our business, right? And like the changing trends and times, we're not anchored to it has to be contemporary art or fine art at all. The second database, though, is on the private side. And I say private may not be the best name for it because you could go to a gallery and get their catalog. But they call it private sales because they're more bilateral, just not at an auction house. That data set is, if you look at both of them, they are by far the largest in the world. Nobody really, I think if you look at the market out there for data providers, people have been generally focused on the search and filter kind of glossary approach, which is fine. But then again, okay, thank you for maybe some comps, but what is the value, right? You still end up going to an appraisal firm. Thank you for the appraisal. What does it mean for what I should do? So you go to your advisor now, right? Or you go to 3 or 4 people, frankly, go to your tax planner, your state attorney, whatever it is, your wealth manager. And so when you put the data is a piece of it, and it definitely is a moat and it'll always grow, but it's how you use it, to monetize this as a standalone service is I don't know, you want to do 50 million in revenue? That's not what we're trying to do here. I want to do 5 billion. How do we get to 5 billion? Use data as a component. It's part of every service that we provide, in addition to providing premium analytics, right? So we have integrations with wealth management softwares, for instance. We can plug in, we've done this now for a number of clients. We're now moving to the enterprise side, like I previewed, where we actually can pipe in data on a regular basis with updated valuation estimates. We're using AI to actually refine them further and further. And as more data comes in, we can get more accurate. As we start looking at more capital market assumption at large, they can get more accurate. Simple example that it's funny to think that nobody really uses it. This is an incredibly, I won't even say inflation sensitive as much as money supply sensitive asset class. So if you bought an art, and because these hold periods are 15 years, you need to incorporate inflation into any of your projections, but it's not. It is not a part of any model or valuation, predictions that exist in the market. It sounds obvious, but we're not in a deflationary environment, that's for sure, even if prices are oscillating or they're volatile. So it is a core component. We hired an amazing data scientist recently. We also brought on one of the most kind of foremost analysts in the world in the art data space as a dedicated advisor. And we've actually made a few other data hires around data management, data engineering. But it's for the purpose of delivering better service and selling premium analytics, but integrating it into your total, financial plan.
And so the data stood out to me. Another one was your plans for private exchanges and secondary transaction marketplaces. Where does that strategy stand within how you're approaching this merger?
Yeah, I think I describe it to people as well, let me go back to the anecdote around what doesn't work with these companies that have come into the market. They lead with the hardest product, which is like convincing somebody to
Sales,
like sell a
yeah.
different way, right? However, if you become the trusted platform for people to manage their assets, tokenized AI-driven valuations, all of that, great. But you've built this kind of go-to shop to transact in all these different ways. It's a natural extension to think about an alternative sales channel. I think we've all kind of agreed here, like we're focused. We believe in delivering liquidity solutions. It starts with what do you own? What is it worth? Delivering insights. And now we're actually right now moving into the kind of financing facilitation or capital markets advisory space. And the extension of that will actually lead into the alternative sales channel. But, as Winnie would be aware of, like, we got to stay focused. So it's a roadmap question, but it's just a matter of time.
I love it.
15
I can't
months?
wait.
I don't know.
I can't wait for the day we can kind of sell, a $2-3 million and buy a $2-3 million painting within a few clicks, and it's all on chain, and all the authentication is that, and you've removed the need for, say, like, someone taking a huge cut or something. I don't know.
That's what it comes down to. The fees are
Thing.
crazy in this market.
Totally.
So people look at it as like, well, I could just undercut them. And you can if you do all these other things correctly,
Yeah, I love that you guys aren't starting with the obvious kind of, problem first, and you're building the brand credibility, getting them in the door as customers so that their entire portfolio is already tracked. And then later on, like you can slowly kind of embed those new features. Cool. Well, Pete, I guess to close this out, let's do a few rapid fire questions if you're ready.
Sure.
What is your favorite piece of art?
Well, that's a great question. I can't say exactly the artwork because we own it in the fund, so it's technically private, but we bought an artwork. It's a beautiful story, frankly. It's an Israeli artist married to a Palestinian woman. And
Wow.
all of his art actually incorporates weaving from Palestinian women as well as painting from Israeli artists. And we bought it now, it's probably a little over a year ago. I think it just has, like, I get chills thinking
Yeah,
about it
that's
just because
super
it has so much
interesting.
meaning behind it. And it was a reflection of how art, listen, we're not UNESCO, you know what I mean? Like, we're not a philanthropy, but at the same time, it shows how like art and culture can drive, collaboration and cooperation, right?
Yeah.
And it just sort of transcends so much of the BS in the world because it's inherently beautiful.
What is a surprising use case you've seen for crypto and art, or that you want to see?
Great question. I think the biggest opportunity is on the financing side. I kind of look at this as the first opportunity that I'm aware of where the real world asset is tokenized, a loan can be tokenized around it, and then whether it's actually in a security structure or exempt, that the tranching and securitization can also be on chain to allow for instant payment start to finish. Others have gotten there, but there's always this traditional wrapper involved, that prevents it from truly being fully digitally native. And I'm very excited for that opportunity. There's a dearth of capital. Let me say, there's a dearth of originators in the art world and a lot of capital that wants to finance it. And so we'd really like to be a part, we're extremely focused on being a part of that journey.
Love that. And then last one, for those of us who can't afford a Monet yet, what are some up and coming emerging artists that we can kind of purchase for under, say, like 50K?
I mean,
You got any?
we do. Check out Alia Ali, or maybe it's Ali Alia. I hate to say
Okay,
it,
we'll
but
take a
it's such
look.
a similar name.
Yeah.
We have, that's one of the artists I know we've owned and bought on behalf of clients. Emerging artists, great gallery representation. I think generally, if you're going into the emerging artist space, it starts with a gallery. there are a lot of them that are like traders that don't care about the artists. There are other ones like give them health insurance, and it sounds like kind of menial, but you're talking about like a starving artist that only gets paid when their paintings are sold. They're represented by a gallery that we have a ton of respect for, that's produced great artists. Eventually the artists outgrow the gallery and kind of step up. But, those are the ones that actually you see the alpha generation from a $20,000 piece to 50 just because they went to the next gallery. And as an investor, that's where you can pick up, 2.5x multiple.
Awesome. Well, Pete, it's been great to have you on Digitized Spotlight. Where can listeners find you and learn more about Winston Artory Group?
Yeah, so today we launched a new website. So that's a starting point. But obviously, I think the easiest way, and I'm happy to play quarterback, shoot me a Telegram. It's Pete_Lucas. Honestly, there's so much spam on Telegram already. It would be fine if this got out, and I got more of it, whatever. But yeah, we're always open to chatting. We actually dabble in digital art here and there. So, we want to be a part of the ride and bring this kind of the next generation.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Pete.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us as we chat with Pete. It's been fascinating to learn about how Winston Artory Group is bringing objectivity and technology to the art world while maintaining the trust and relationships that drive this industry.
Agreed. It's been awesome to understand how they're building defensible moats through proprietary data and deep industry relationships. The intersection of art and blockchain technology presents a compelling opportunity. Follow us as we chat more with founders building at the intersection of consumer and crypto.